This week on Sky Notes, Tracy and Lillian talk about Uranus and astrology, the disruptor. And as it finally moves from Taurus into Gemini, we're shifting from instability in the physical world to instability in information, communication, and what we think is true. So join us as we check our Sky Notes.
Hello, everybody. This is us here at Sky Notes, and Tracy and I are joining you after looking at our Sky Notes. And today we're going to talk about Uranus, both its place in astrology, how we use it, and what it means that it's going from Taurus to Gemini. Hi, Tracy.
Excellent job. Hi, Lillian. You did that so much better than I would have. We're laughing because, again, we did not plan who was going to introduce the show.
Who's going to do it? I'll do it.
Yes, thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So we're going to try. We're speaking about a topic that, Uranus is not a linear planet. It's not streamlined. So we're going to try to have a conversation with a bit of a line through it, but I make no promises. How about you?
That's right. I promise to stick with it and all the twists and turns.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah. So this is in honor of, it's going to finally firmly land in Gemini on April 25th. And so we have this shift that's been happening, all last year until now. So this is, you felt it already.
Yeah.
And so let's start talking about it in terms of, natal astrology and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That sounds really good.
Now, it's interesting because when I came into studying astrology, it was still a lot of very modern take on things. Uranus was described as the ruler of Aquarius, and with traits that were quite positive, and really kind of only positive. I don't ever remember reading descriptions of Aquarius or Uranus that were. I can't think of any of the negative traits.
I'm getting a picture at the end of the 40-Year-Old Virgin where they had all of the cast come out dressed in white singing, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius."
Yeah, that's kind of, that's true how they describe it in a lot of those modern books. And they talk about, about how it rules Aquarius. The idea that, it's brilliant and it's the innovator and it's, quick thinking and it's, I don't know. Can you think of anything?
Oh my gosh. The rebel. And that's kind of the link to the astrology that I studied and am steeped in, which is evolutionary astrology. And it's both rebel and radical in its difference from modern astrology, in that Uranus is considered to be a sign or a diagnostic of where you may be exhibiting signs of trauma. And you were sharing something earlier that was really cool. I like to say from earlier in your life, or if this is a concept you're comfortable with, from other lifetimes.
Right.
And there's a process that's implied right away. So we were saying it before, but the TLDR, the too long didn't read, for me is evolutionary astrology is a great diagnostic for trauma, but sometimes I put it back on the shelf. So there are so many different ways that we look at it. I think the three key ways are its relationship to Saturn as a means of processing. It's a higher octave of Mercury. And so it contains a larger vision of that kind of opinion or study. And then the third part is it is the long memory, and that memory goes back and that memory goes forward. And the forward process includes Neptune, where you hit the collective memory. And in that forward process, it contains the blueprint for your future. So it's quite a little muscular planet in evolutionary astrology. But in a natal chart, if it's not intensely aspected, you will only feel that when it is triggered by a planet in transit.
And that's true of the outers in general.
Right.
And so, and sometimes even when they're triggered by transit, you might not, if they're not aspecting natal planets in your chart, you might not even consciously realize what's happening with that transit right earlier on.
Yeah.
But once you have a major aspect from that planet,
Yeah.
that's when you really start to understand what the natal placement is about.
Yes. I
So
like that.
yeah, so for me, I mean, Uranus is so baked into my natal story that the Uranus transits were just um, fairly straightforward evolutions, no less uncomfortable, but I wasn't confused about what was happening.
Mhm.
Whereas Neptune makes zero aspects in my chart, and the first major one was I was so confused, and
Yeah.
it was so uncomfortable because I just didn't have the same relationship with Neptune that I do with Pluto and that I have with Uranus in my natal chart.
Yeah.
So sometimes talking about them can be tricky because if somebody doesn't have, so in this case, Uranus
Yeah.
doesn't have the aspects natally, they might not yet understand the energy of Uranus.
Right.
So yeah, so that's a really good thing to bring up for sure. Now, what's interesting from an evolutionary perspective, I love all of that, and the idea of the past trauma that connects to something I've learned from Will Morris and medical astrology
Yeah.
and looking at the birth chart and potential birth trauma. He actually does a whole class in his training about let's look at the chart and talk about birth trauma.
Mhm.
And Uranus and Pluto and Neptune are all a really big part of that, but Uranus specifically, especially if the childbirth story is quite chaotic,
Yeah.
right? And quite traumatizing to the mother and the child. I know for me, in that case, it's the connection to the ascendant.
Mm.
It's that, and I take that as that, that ascendant being the birth canal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, because it's conjunct the ruler of my ascendant and the ruler of my sun. Um, so there was my mom was toxic and in the hospital for quite a while, but it was more about speed. I came out like from induction to birth was 30 minutes. I just kind of flew out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was just the fact that in itself can be quite traumatic. So there's
Absolutely.
interesting stories around birth and
Yeah.
trauma and Uranus for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but what has always intrigued me about it, because it definitely anywhere it's connecting in a birth chart is going to give an unpredictable quickness to the other planet and to whatever job the other
Oh, I
planet
like
has,
that. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I know, like, when I've been teaching, talking to people who got Uranus aspecting the moon, it's like, so have you learned to verbally moonwalk yet? Because as I know where it is in my chart, if it's conjunct Mercury, if it's not, no, not conjunct, aspecting Mercury and or the moon,
Mhm.
that like spitting things out of your mouth, especially if there's an emotional trigger, before you have a chance to actually think about them, it's a thing. It's
I
gonna
feel attacked. No, I don't know.
self-reflective,
I don't
sister.
know if I mentioned that I have Uranus at the head of a kite, and the two sextiles are the ascendant and the moon. And this mouth is a problem
Yes,
sometimes.
yes,
It has a whole bunch of information, but
yes,
woof,
yes.
I'm a
Well,
Scorpio rising. The
and
language.
I swear that having that Mercury there, though, is part of the challenge of my not remembering the things that I say,
Yeah.
because the information just actually doesn't ever get processed. If I'm actually like bringing it in from somewhere, it just
Yeah.
flies out before I ever get to hold it.
And that's part of the processing piece. It is the long memory. It is not sure that you will remember.
Right.
The transits will describe how the memory comes up, right? Like how the thing shows up. And
Right.
that's so crazy to me, you know?
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you all of a sudden, like I read, well, there were two things I thought of. I want to touch on this just briefly. Birth trauma. I saw this and I'm not advocating for it because I love when people do the medical stuff that works for them. But I've been watching this channel of a guy who does chiropractic care, and there's a woman too on babies.
Mhm.
And it's always sort of, oh, they were stuck for a while. Oh, they're constipated. Oh, they're stiffening in a way that feels habitual and safe to them, but it's limiting their movement. And it's just so nice to see the babies like, you know, kind of snorkel at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that helps release the Uranus trauma, right?
Well, that's the thing. And then it's always a process. It indicates where a process happens, right? As opposed
Right.
to your sun, where it's like your vitality is just churning, or your moon, where you're figuring out what you need to be emotionally safe, but you're kind of rolling with it. And the other signs are not typically creating a ruckus, you know? And so you
Yeah.
go to aspects for that, right?
Right. Right.
Wrong
Right.
house, wrong combination. And then what does that mean? And so
Right.
Uranus is kind of going to look around all over to see where they can pluck up. Like, did you know you're actually really different from how you're presenting yourself? Because it's so important for you to be who you are.
Right.
But that answer doesn't have to be, because it can take time, right? The outers take a lot of time. It's a
Yeah.
negotiation. Your wild child will always need to negotiate with your rule maker, right?
Right.
And then
Okay. Now you finish that thought, but that's an excellent bridge into what
let's
I
do
wanted
it.
to talk
Let's
about.
go. I want to
So,
hear it.
wait, because so when I went looking today, again, all of this, my mind and this Uranus thing kind of was attached to that original idea that Uranus was ruling Aquarius
Okay.
and how that never sat okay with me. Like my experience of Aquarian humans, they were I mean, there were aspects
Oh,
of
right,
that
right, right.
brilliant, the
Yeah.
fast mind and the and I was going to say rebel, but that rebel piece is actually where I would get stuck because it wasn't consistent. And there was such a, like with every single one I knew, there was at least one place in life that was very Saturnian.
Mhm.
I understood in hindsight, ooh, there's some Saturn energy there.
Yeah.
But really, when you look back at the original Uranos myth from the Greek, he got was with Gaia. They were the originals. They made the
He was
baby.
the sky. She was the earth.
Absolutely. And they were, it was this beautiful until they made babies. And Uranus started getting upset that the babies might take over. And Kronos had to come along and go, you're like causing too much trouble. You need to go.
Right.
But the ideas in that myth are much more about, yes, I'm rebellious as long as you are following the rules that I would like to make. There's a suppression angle in that myth. There's this suppression idea in the Uranus energy. And that to me, if we're going to talk about Uranus ruling Aquarius, that feels the same to me as the Saturn piece. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And I'm getting like a different view of Aquarius now, because it is where Uranus and Saturn meet, right? Like old ruler, new ruler. It is where they touch. So initially my mind went to, is that just, Aquarius? Like, I do think of utopia and friendship. And there's a trope out there that Aquarians love people, but not singular.
Mm. Hmm.
They love all the people, but like, stop, don't get in my way, kind of thing. But
And
it's,
yet they're quite social, right?
well, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Social has to happen. I'm pure water, ready to tackle anything. I don't want to throw a party. No one wants to go to that party.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. You need to lighten it up. It has to be air. And you
Right.
have to kind of know what the rules are and where to break them and all that stuff. But I
Right.
would say in Aquarius, I'm starting to get the vibe that they're kind of containing the potential for dysfunction, right?
Mm,
Where you're like,
mm,
this is the liberation.
right. Well,
Or
and it made me think also because we talk about the shift from Taurus into Gemini and what that feels like with
right,
Uranus, but we can't actually totally not talk about Pluto and Aquarius
right.
because that aspect of Uranus that we're talking about right now, that's going to be a piece of that power Pluto, right? And trying to control maybe from that Aquarius Uranus piece of suppression.
And by control, I just would re-emphasize that it is a chaotic breaking with schedule or expectation. It's control through chaos, not
Hmm.
through, like, Pluto, for sure. You get the sort of admission of consent. Is this okay with you? How about this? Is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? So there's an admission of consent. Uranus just feels like it's constantly, bleh, and so I loved what you said about that, the closeness to another planet. There can be an incendiary response or accelerated, you said. And that's
Yeah.
so accurate, because it's sort of like we're going from, to touch on the Taurus, a fixed content to be in one place. Some Tauruses I've seen like to call themselves lazy. I haven't seen that, but that is the vibe of that sign, into I don't want to be bored, Gemini. So if you're already in a pattern with the Uranus where it can create incendiary movement and it moves into a mutable sign that could do literally anything, it starts to speak to just anything happening. And then just to bring it back to what you were talking about with the individuals who are Aquarians, boy, I've heard social dinosaur as much as I've heard revolutionary.
Interesting.
And it's a warning almost, and maybe it's a warning that even Kronos himself from the myths has to deal with, right? Because they were all eating babies, not literally guys, but they didn't want there to be a succession, and it's interesting, right? That we created gods who were afraid to die, right? Succession's inevitable. And so there's a dysfunction there, right? I create the rules, my way or the highway.
Right.
And then it doesn't work. And then you find out it doesn't work. And then I do think that Aquarius has the objectivity that both Saturn and Uranus can bring to say, I can see this from a different angle so I can remediate it. And in that way, I find the Aquarians to be dead clever. Just like, wow, where'd you come up with that? Clever.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think so that suddenness, that, because I love the imagery of lightning when we're talking about Uranus, that, that spark, that instant, right? Like, it's not instant. There was a buildup. There was something that needed to happen before the lightning hit.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have it connected to a planet in your chart, that's the buildup.
Yeah.
The transit's going to come and make the hit.
Yeah.
So if you're not actually aware of what's happening with Uranus in your natal chart, you can be shocked,
right,
by the thing that comes up.
Right.
But if you are working with that energy, if you are allowing yourself to not get stuck, because that's really the theme, right? Like,
right.
Uranus does not want anything to be stuck.
Right.
I do love the piece around authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I do love the piece around there's with authenticity, there's a self-honesty.
Yeah.
That is important, and
it doesn't hide when you're suppressing things, right? If we're going to talk about the relationship with the Saturn.
Yes.
If it sees Saturn suppressing something, guess what it's going to look for to make disruption.
Right. And I think that it has been so disruptive because of that, the fixity of the Taurus, right? And that's not even a trait of the people who are Taurian.
Right.
It's just if we look at Earth and fixed, it doesn't get much more stationary than the combination of those two things.
That's right.
And so Uranus coming along and going, no, we need to shake it loose.
Yeah.
When I looked back I was curious about, because with Uranus going into Gemini and the connection to communication, for some reason it made me, I was wondering about, it was the War of 1812, but I just remember being in the eastern part of the country and reading about a war that Canada won against the US without ever fighting, because they used deceptive messages to throw off, right? It was the Brits and Canadians, actually. And so I wanted to see what Uranus was doing there, because I thought, oh God, if it was in Gemini, that's kind of funny.
That's clever.
It was actually in Taurus.
Huh?
At that time, and it was the War of 1812, and it was actually quite consistent that they were constantly doing this from different vantage points and lying about how many troops they were sending in and lying about where they were going to be, and it was quite fascinating, because when I looked, so it was Brock was his name, Isaac Brock. Do I have his? And then of course I want to see what's going on in his chart with Uranus. But so he has Uranus and Taurus, But get this, it's trine Neptune in Virgo, and
Mm.
it's trine Pluto in Capricorn.
Oh,
And I'm just like, that's so, and then the Mars is conjunct his sun in Libra. So
wow.
that's where the air piece comes in. And
Yeah.
also the psychological warfare
Right.
of Mars and Libra, right?
Yes. Strategy.
But the fact that at a time when communication is not easy to do,
Right.
right? That with Mercury and Taurus, he was able to go, well, let's do something, let's try something a little different
Oh,
here.
and that is another component that I think doesn't get expressed enough with Aquarius. Martial. It is
Yeah.
martial. And in
Yeah.
the sense of, boy, you better hope you're generals in Aquarius. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
there's something about that sociability and the connection, desire to be connected with people and in touch with a lot of people with little obligations that really helps that Aquarius energy flow specifically. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so what's going to be interesting with the Uranus and Gemini is you've got Uranus, which is sort of on this intellectual for thinking about the way it thinks and operates,
Mhm.
my way or the highway kind of
Mhm.
energy. I'm gonna rebel and I'm gonna do all this stuff, but it's going to be my idea of
Right.
utopia, my
Right.
idea of
Right.
what things are supposed to be, right? In one of the least genuine signs because Mercury's gonna or Gemini's gonna change, right? Depending on the new information it takes in. It's just
Yeah.
its nature.
Right.
It's so mutable,
Yeah.
mentally mutable,
It
right?
has to collect a bunch of stuff, which may look like it's getting hung up on stuff,
Yeah.
right? But it needs a quantity of
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what we've seen actually with AI over the last year
Mhm.
is sort of we've had this preview of how that can get
I
used
like that.
against us, you
Yeah.
know?
Yes.
And so having to make sure that we know where our information is coming from
Right. And
and
also,
that
yeah, yeah, go.
no, I was just saying that we just need to be really aware of that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to jump over that. I was just thinking, and this is kind of, I don't want to over discuss because I don't feel qualified to, but I also don't want to leave out that there are just intense martial activities going on. And one of the things that I find relevant from that is there's a sense in the US that there's just open hunting season on everyone's data. And then in Iran, they're finding people because it's open hunting season on everyone's data. So there's this really intense, like, make sure your tools are providing the support they need and have the security baked in because there aren't as many blinders these days. There aren't as many silos, I guess I would say. Uh,
Right.
and also don't make the assumption that just because somebody has all the data, they're going to be able to leverage it the way
Right.
that we would expect to get a touch or something like that. And that makes me feel like Uranus too, right? Because it's kind of in my mind, if I think of a blueprint, I imagine you and I standing on a blueprint and it goes out in comically long directions, right? And it doesn't just include what's going on for you and what's going on for me. It's back through time and it's out into the future. And so we can kind of look around to all of that. And it's this sense of alignment, right? With something that's bigger than us, what we can generate when we work together. So it's really exciting. And I know Carolyn Casey has talked about this as, the second go around of creating new rules for the world. And I do feel a sense of that because that's how I'm built. But I have no idea if the world ever requires our, remodeling or,
Yeah,
or
right.
we make.
That's a really good point.
Let's sit there for just a second because that's the other piece about lightning. It comes in really quickly and leaves really quickly. And one of the pieces of guidance for lightning, or I'm sorry, Uranus, is that if a love comes to you during a Uranus transit, they may leave that quickly. If a contract arrives when Uranus is transiting something and it's going to be gone soon, you might want to wait till after it's past that transit before you sign that contract because it's quick in, quick out energy. So
Yes. Yes. I love that. Well, and that's the thing about the outer planets that's especially when we're talking about them by transit that I find really, really interesting And I don't know if it's the speed, like that they're so much slower, but
Mm.
there's something really unrelenting about what they're teaching.
Mhm.
And, it doesn't.
Unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can try to pretend you don't want to deal with it. But and because Uranus is sudden, it tends to kind of spank,
It's going to
and
catch you off guard.
yeah,
That's
well, and that's the cosmic joke astrologically,
right.
is that it's like if the issue that somebody's coming to see you with is an astrologer and it's Uranus and they're hoping for prediction, it's like Uranus by design is going to do the thing you didn't think of. And that's
Right.
actually my advice. Like, don't
Right.
bother trying to figure it out or try to predict,
Right.
because if you come up with 20 possible predictions, it'll be the 21st that you didn't think of.
Yeah.
So don't waste your mental energy trying to decide ahead of time. Just keep working on the things you feel compelled to do, right?
Absolutely. And that
And
would be true even if you use the diagnostic of Uranus as trauma. Like, say, for example, somebody's got Mercury conjunct Uranus on the descendant. I can't think of anybody I know who has that. I'm just saying it as an example. And they run into issues with their language creating fights when they didn't mean to, or not being interpreted correctly. Or here's an interesting thing. My husband and I looked at this video from Heidi Priebe, who is like I don't know what she is, but she talks about trauma a lot. She talked about pseudo mutuality, pseudo hostility. And in the South, I've noticed a lot that some folks really employ pseudo mutuality, which is that warmth that's so yummy, like everybody's welcome here. But they also employ pseudo hostility, which is, oh my God, I love that shirt. Or for me, I always think about Parker Posey from Parks and Rec, where she goes, "Your hair has so many flyaways. I don't know what's going on." Like she's trying to say something nice, but she can't possibly do it. And the people are so lovely. You're just sitting there shocked, like, what's going on? And the difficulty with that is it's in the name, pseudo. You're trying to get down underneath that. So if you use the diagnostic and you go to your Saturn, right, and this person has Saturn and Cancer in the fourth house, oh my God, I'm looking at a family issue now. There's something going on with the whole, shebang. I still would say with Uranus coming, I'd look for the Gemini connection, and I would say, here's where it might happen, but we know it may have something to do with your family, and it may have something to do with communication in your relationships. That's all I'm putting out there. That's the limit I can give you for prediction.
yeah, I love it. Well, and the thing that's fascinating to me, especially when, you talk to people who don't believe in astrology
Sure.
and you say, well, what about the midlife crisis? It's literally, that's just your Uranus opposition.
Right.
Everybody goes through it. And it's in different degrees just based on where it's sitting in your chart. And
Yeah.
it's the disruptor, right? It's at that point in your life where, are you living your authentic journey? Are you being true to who you're supposed to be?
And
And
how
the
are you
farther
treating the seeds for your next big life change?
and the farther exactly. And if you're so far away from what that authentic story is, then you might not even get to the seeds yet, because
Yeah.
there's going to be quite a dramatic return, or potentially, right? Getting pushed towards that place.
Yeah. No, I liked what you said before, unrelenting.
Mhm.
That's the good one, right? And it kind
Yeah.
of has to be because, I don't know about your ego, but my ego is ridiculous. Just wants what she wants, doesn't really care, doesn't pay attention to anything. Oh my gosh. And I try so hard to work with her, like really get into my body, do things consistently, we're co-creating, but it would have to be unrelenting because all the little deposits of ego, I was crabbing about something yesterday to my husband. And I was like, why did I give so much space to this issue? Why do I keep running into new parts of it? What is going on? And why isn't that my territory? What is going on? So yeah, yeah, it could be shocking, it could be hurtful, not meant to be. The idea is to negotiate and tussle with how much of this do you want? How much of this do you want? What do you not want anymore? And how willing are you to give it up?
I love it. Yes. And Uranian people are attracted to Uranian people.
Hell
They're,
yes.
yeah, I think, and it's the same with, I feel like with Pluto and Neptune as well. If there's a strong one of those outer planet signatures in your chart, there's a resonance there that is just not when you meet people who don't have those same aspects or, that same energy operating in their chart.
Right. Or they'll only have it for certain periods of time.
Yeah, yeah, not baked right into the personality,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I find that with folks who don't like astrology, and that's why it's okay. It's like they're doing something different. And so it doesn't have to have anything to do with astrology, and power to them. Like it's especially for those of us who are sharing stories about the conflicts that come up from these transits and stuff. It's okay. A lot of people don't want to hear that stuff at all.
Yeah,
That's
some
fine.
people don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Leave it to us. We'll take
Yeah.
care of
I know, right? A Kleenex at every cocktail table.
it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And everybody, so this is the thing that I found really interesting about this the trend that Uranus moving into Gemini is that the transit of it seemed a little less dramatic. That was the thing I noticed with Pluto and Neptune and Uranus is that they didn't have as many passes in and out
Right.
in this particular sign pairings that they're each in. So people who were experiencing these transits, so who had like late Taurus or late fixed, sorry, that's a way better way to say it, late fixed Uranus or early mutable Uranus, kind of were getting less like over and over again
Right.
transits.
Yeah.
Like because for me it seemed like it went on forever and ever and ever because I
Right.
had like the very solid 5 pass
Yeah.
and you know but this group had longer like stationing on those degrees, so the transit itself was lasting longer but wasn't happening as many times. So the vibe of that, and for all of us collectively, whether we're having that transit or not, the vibe of that I think has felt we could settle in a little bit more, right? Because when it actually stays, sits on a degree for a long time, we can kind of get comfortable with that and go, well, I don't actually have to make any changes.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that for some people, especially people who are naturally quite fixed in their charts and not interested in making any kind of changes,
Right.
that maybe the things that happened to kind of get them moving seemed more dramatic, right?
Yeah. I think it
Whereas
was drama.
right. And so for the mutable people, so anybody who's got early Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, it's going to be different because that energy is moving all the time.
Right.
Right. But then it's likely more frenetic. It's more vibratory, it's more like I can't settle in, I can't calm down, and the same with like if anybody's got a lot of air in their chart, they're getting the trine from that Pluto and Uranus and air.
Yeah, it's a lot of
It's
energy.
a lot of earth energy. It's a
Yeah.
lot of busy brain.
Yeah.
So anybody who's got a lot of air in their chart in early degrees is like, yeah, overstimulated likely, I would say.
Yeah. And then physiologically, for me, I know that I've increased my supplements, to include the omega-3s and theanine, which is in green tea. It's not caffeine. It actually can calm you down. And it is specifically because I wake up like, right. And I know that part of it is my age and I have conditions that can contribute to that. But it's just so interesting to have these, like you're talking about coming to rest, but you have to find it every time. And speaking of that, that's just a reminder of grounding as well. And, touching grass. Yeah.
And I just had like this, when we're talking about the health side of astrology and remediations. So if there's strong Aquarius, I know Kira recommends salt is associated with Aquarius. And that's interesting when you think about electrolytes, just the word electrolytes, right?
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a thing. Like if you're feeling over jazzed right? Feeling
Yeah.
like you can't come down, there is something that's really helpful about adding some salt. And I know I'm craving it a lot more right now,
Yeah.
which is usually a tell that I'm being overrun by whatever the transit is if I'm craving
Yeah.
something associated to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so salt electrolytes, if you've got a lot of Aquarius in your chart,
Go
that's
ahead and load
usually a
up.
good trick. Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because the heavy Aquarian people I know are the most salt heavy people that I know.
Another nugget of evolutionary astrology that
Oh,
talks a little
please.
bit about culture stuff.
I love it when you
That
share that.
is that both Gemini and Sagittarius are related to like foreign people, indigenous people, Gemini in particular, and that it can be a sign of um, being, I don't know, the first time you're a woman, the first time you're a man, the first time you're a white person, the first time you're a black person, it would be a sign that there was a quick switch or something in this current lifetime, the Gemini would. And it would suggest a natural inclination to observe those kind of things, indigenous practices. You can see in parallel, I hope in parallel, but I pay attention to it. So I have no way of objectively knowing that, Western culture has increased, we're not going to talk about climate control. Indigenous culture in the US has purchased land to prevent data centers from being built. Uh, Indigenous cultures have casinos, and so now they're working on community and figuring out how to reshare governing principles that don't necessarily screw up the entire planet. So, what I'm trying to say is, I have seen sort of in parallel these developments that are increasing, in quality or impact. And I'm really curious to see during the time that it's in Gemini if we revisit for helpful insights indigenous practices.
Hmm. And where my mind went as soon as
Yep.
you, and thank you for
Sure.
bringing that up about
Yeah.
Gemini and the indigenous piece, it's associated with the axis with
Mhm.
Sag, because when I think about the political climate where I am, and I mean, the conversation in Canada has been huge around indigenous stuff. That the things that need to be rectified, things that need to be recognized.
Right.
This has been the last, I'm going to say, quite loud over the last 10 years.
Got it.
Um, and what's beautiful about how Justin Trudeau worked is that he tried
Mhm.
to work more with that community, with those communities, because there are several,
Right.
and do the right thing. And our current prime minister is going even farther into that. But where I am in the province that I'm in,
Mhm.
there's talk of separation, and it's
Right.
like none of the land where I am actually belongs to the crown.
Right.
It's
Right.
all leased treaty land. So the fact that we have Uranus going into Gemini, and with that connection to
It is a rather dismal
you
announcement for folks who are not into diversity because it is diversity.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, what's interesting is that the binary of Gemini,
Sure.
and the being able to see the information both sides. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward once Uranus is solidly in Gemini and this conversation gets louder here.
Yeah, and I assume other people will show up, and it'll be um, people will come and go, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the same here, right? It's
Yeah.
sort of a popcorn experience. People are coming and going, and I'm starting now to kind of think about that Taurian period as, this is not a generous thing. Bear with me; it's just an idea. But if I were to solidify a grudge, I would do it in Taurus. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like I would try in Scorpio, but I would probably get whacked. But
Right.
in Taurus, you could really crystallize, right? And that's what Uranus is trying to help. Like it wants a flexible Saturn to the extent that that means continuing the, evolution. So with it moving into Gemini, it could be this just release of all this energy, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's really intriguing to me has been like when we've watched this back and forth of Uranus from Gemini into Taurus over the last year and a half. When you look at the desperation of governments trying to take over land, which
Yeah.
is so associated with Taurus, and how ramped up that got in the last year and a half, well, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like, of course, this isn't what they're thinking. But if you're looking at it through an astrological lens, it's like they're panicking because this energy is shifting away from Taurus right away.
Exactly.
The conversation's going to change dramatically,
Exactly.
right? And so
Yeah.
that's wild to think of it that way.
Should we get into the discovery chart and see what
All right. So can you see the chart?
I can? Thank you.
So wild that it is in Gemini.
Yes.
If I go here, can we see my cursor? No.
Yeah.
Hang on. Anyway, so Uranus is okay. I'm going to put this in people's brains and I apologize, but it'll stick. The Uranus symbol that I use is the one that looks like it's taking a poop. So if you say Uranus, it's really easy to remember the Uranus symbol. Yes, I am still allowed to teach.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I never saw that and I can't unsee it.
No, I've put that in mind now, it'll stick. So we are going to experience Uranus is having its return
Yes.
because it was in Gemini when it was born. And one of the misconceptions about Uranus that drives me just a little bit snaky. So all this time through history, they could periodically see Uranus. That didn't just become visible magically in 1781. It would come and go, which is funny when you think about the unpredictability of Uranus.
I do like that.
I do too, but they just labeled it a fixed star because and it could be seen sometimes and not other times. But it was discovered as a planet in 1781, March 13th, 1781. And so it's in this wild combination. It opposes Mars and Saturn conjunct in Sagittarius.
That's
So this ideology, right, and conflict,
yeah,
which is fantastic. And then that they both square the sun in Pisces. So there's a built-in like disruptive energy just even in the day that it is discovered.
yes,
Right. So that in itself, and it's mutable. So by nature, right, there's going to be a comfort to Uranus and Gemini, I would think, right? It's its birth sign if we want to look at it as a natal chart. Yeah. And then the other thing that's crazy is that it is in air when it's discovered, as are Neptune in Libra and Pluto in Aquarius.
Wow.
So I don't think they're actually Pluto and Uranus will be in the same relationship this time around, right? Because I think Pluto will move too far and Uranus went into Gemini a little late.
That's right.
But there's this interesting, like you've got Jupiter in Scorpio, Mars and Sagittarius. So they're in mutual reception with each other. So there's this huge piece of this discovery chart that is around our beliefs and our ideologies.
Yeah.
And Uranus sitting on the other side, opposing those, right? So there is a sense of built-in objectivity because of the opposition, so the potential for objectivity is there, but that we can be overcome by the ideologies of the other side and maybe thinking we're being objective and not understanding that we're perhaps only seeing it from our own vantage point.
That is a big deal. I mean, I run into that all the time. And I want to say that things have been so absolutely chaotic everywhere that it has proven over and over again. You can't just stick a label on one type of meat suit and say they did it. It feels like we're all just changing. And this is big change, and big change is uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes. And the potential, I mean, I think because we had the Neptune and Pisces piece, which really screwed, I believe, with our realities. And the fact that the Mercury and Pisces had so many long transits to Neptune, I think that was part of where we have gone down this rabbit hole of deception. I'm gonna give that to Neptune and Mercury.
Well, and I think that's legit, but I want to counter it with something that I think is healthy, and that is I'm so hot for storytelling right now. And part of that is before Neptune went into Pisces, I was so hoping that it would mean the end of reality TV. And it has not meant that at all. It's meant the increase of deception. I watched Steve Ballmer on some ad where he's trying to explain the government. And I'm like, dude, you just totally uh, committed fraud in Portland with your basketball team. I don't know why you should be talking to anybody about honest data from an honest guy. Like, do you not think we see that? Like, get him off the air. So it didn't do that. But what I will say is we need to cultivate our storytelling. We need to honor that story and come up with a new one. And if the blueprint's there and it's connected to talking, we're going to hear so many blueprints.
I just had the weirdest flash in my head
Yay.
because we're talking about this, going through this phase of like just people willing to believe whatever suits their narrative, And of course, because we've been like all of this story about like the gurus being full of caca, and Oprah's gotten into trouble. And the fact that she's not another Aquarius, but not the point, has, gotten behind some people that really she shouldn't have, and she's staying quiet about it. My point is, the thing that just jumped in my head is I remember there was an author she had gotten behind who was an addict
Yes.
and written a book.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a memoir, although he said the whole time it's creative nonfiction. Right. And so it was called out that it didn't happen exactly the way he told it. And he came straight out and said, no, I mean, I said it was creative nonfiction. So the story is told in a way that it dramatizes it in some way. Right. But what blows my mind when we think about where we are now versus where we were then, people were so mad that it wasn't 100% the truth.
And now you've got pictures of people on top of mermaids and shit, and people doing whatever and hanging out with Einstein and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, whatever, it's fun. And
Oprah was so mad. Oprah was felt so deceived. And now we're at the place where I don't know. I find there was an interesting foreshadowing in that for me anyways, where I'm just like, what a weird inconsistency. Yeah. Hey, so strange. But yeah, when I look at this particular chart and I think about what Uranus, because to me, it's like it chose to finally emerge at this moment. It was being sneaky up until this point, until we were ready to see it. That's how I feel about all of these things that have been discovered later in our it's like they come when we're ready and when we need them.
And I would, just because we've been having this sort of theme, I would wonder if Saturn didn't suppress it. If Saturn kept eating Uranus and then spitting him out, eating storytelling. And then I love what you were saying about how there's something about the putrid nature of water that I can't help but think about when I think about Neptune and Pisces. Like, God bless us, everyone, but water needs a filter. And the soaking and putridness of storytelling always needs to be countered with like the sharpness of storytelling, the kindness of storytelling, the clarity of storytelling, the structure of storytelling. And I think that that's what we're being called to look for as we tap into the blueprint. I think it'll be more available. And I almost signed up for a storytelling workshop this weekend, but I would have double booked myself just to kind of really get in there, right? Like, authors who are looking at imagination and unlimited vision are really capturing my imagination these days. And I feel like we maybe don't yet have the language for what will articulate where we're going.
And I love that, because when I think about this chart and I think about the fact that Pluto's back in the same place, Uranus back in the same place, Chiron is moving back to its same place this summer. We are returning to something.
Yeah.
And because it's Uranus, we don't get to know what it is.
Right.
But we are revisiting these particular things at this time, right? Yeah. So Chiron and Taurus, there's an importance there that we need to be paying attention to, because that happens in the summer.
Yeah.
And there's an importance in the Pluto and Aquarius piece of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I'm not willing to guess what that means. Who
Right.
knows,
Right.
But we the disruptions are there to move us forward.
Yeah. 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 And
Yeah.
there's a new story emerging. I don't know where you could be in the world where you don't know that that's happening. Whether you're like, knock that off, quit making a news story, how dare you? Or you're like, hey, you have to hear this. This is crazy.
The amount of times though that I've heard in the last 3 months that somebody's been traveling and they talked to somebody who had no clue what was going on is shocking to me.
We were talking before we got online, I think, about Earth schools and the different Earth schools that people can belong in. And you can be right next to somebody who's just never going to join you for lunch at your Earth campus ever, ever, ever. And you won't know it, right? It's the signs we get are they're not for you. They're not for you. They're
Right.
not for you. And it's
Right.
not, I mean, everybody is learning something
Yeah.
on their own here.
Everybody's here for a different reason, 100%.
And the whole thing is the thing I really want to take home, right? Is that the relationship between Uranus and Saturn means you're coming home. You're going to have a conflict. You're going to metabolize that conflict. You're going to come back to the group. The rules might be a little, mushy for a bit, but it's because of that that you develop trust and you learn how to let people be who they are, and you get a more resilient meat suit, less reactive kind of thing. Me, I'm super reactive. So I'm just going to stay on my own until all this mess passes.
How about we reframe that? You are super receptive.
Oh, that's fair. I like that. I am
Yeah.
super receptive.
You are super receptive.
I am.
Well, and the other thing that I remember studying with Chris McCrae, and because she was really into geodetics.
Yes.
And so Uranus often following the lines of Uranus across the map and the globe tells some really interesting stories when it comes to earthquakes, volcano eruptions, like all of those sort of like surprising events that are transformative, whether you want them to be or not. Right. Things that can literally shift the landscape into something completely new are generally Uranus is part of that story.
Yeah.
And so that can even happen to us as individuals, that foundation that we're on. If we are not where we are meant to be at this point in time, or I don't know how else to phrase that, Uranus is going to come and go, nope, the ground, we're going to change what that ground looks like because you need to be on something new. And so it comes out of nowhere and goes, surprise.
I do have something I think I can share. Let me see if I can grab it from Jeff Green's book about the 3 evolutionary groups. There's the, in teleology, I'm going to see if I can get this right. Genetics, culture, and your chart kind of thing. And that describes your whole kit and caboodle. And this is more societal, which I think is a Uranian tip because it's describing how we group. And it's talking about where some people land and how they evolve into different focuses. So I'm going to read it and I want to know what you think. 1/3 of people are going to be primarily oriented to the past, to all the values, all the moral structures, and all the beliefs that symbolize what has been. 1/3 of the people are in various degrees of rebellion to that which has been or is. They want to revolutionize or change the social structure. They are iconoclasts, social rebels, the avant-garde, edge of society, malcontents, outlaws, political or religious revolutionaries, or the hermit. And the hermit showed up a lot in Mark Jones's terrific lecture, which I'll get a link for this to share with you guys. He had Uranus as the hermit because he's a way to evolve. And then when he comes, he's shining his light, and the light is starlight. He goes into a really good idea. Okay, and then here's the third one. These are from Jung. 1/3 of the people are ambivalent. Since this third may or may not participate in social changes in a conscious or active way, you can see why social change is slow most of the time. These people are going to go with the flow. They cannot make up their minds either way. So what they're trying to say is 1/3 of the people, what I heard, which is less flattering, is herd mentality, which is you're safe in a herd, so you're never going to move outside of that. Then evolution, think of it as like adolescence. When the kid needs more space, they start to rebel against the structures. That's called individuation. And the third is called spiritual evolution. And that is where you are disseminating. And I think you had something about Uranus disseminating from our prior conversation, that there was an aspect that was disseminating.
Oh,
But
it in the discovery chart,
yeah,
the moon phase is a disseminating moon phase, so it has something
exactly.
to teach. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's ripened and it's whole and it's sound, and so it's ready to share. And that's where we're getting that Uranus is actually here to tell us something and not just trying to annoy us. But the reason why I bring up the teleology example and this example is because part of the diagnostic is I've got the chart, but I haven't met you, right? So until I say, where are you at? And you'll tell me where you're at. Me and my folks go and do this every weekend. You'll say, I used to do this, but stuff has happened. There's conflict, right? Or you'll say, the service I do includes da 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 da, and I've never seen it kind of pan out any other way. Where there's no judgment, right? It's just different Earth schools, different places where you land.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always I mean, I intrigued. I don't know. Like it's just striking to me when I see charts of people who have the outer planets aren't talking to any of the personal planets,
Right.
and they tend to live in much more of a not necessarily herd, but just their connection. They're generally not on the internet. They are generally not big travelers. They're not. Not necessarily that they wouldn't be interested in other places and other cultures. That's not necessarily the case, but that connection to the bigger globe isn't as interesting to them at all, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And it's just so that connection to those outer planets and those bigger cycles aren't necessarily a big part of their
They don't
story.
feed them. They don't.
No,
And
no.
that's perfectly fine. We're talking
Mhm.
about the people who are hit kind of left, right, and center.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and so it's going to go into Uranus on April 20th, into Gemini on April 25th. So that's coming up just in a short time, and it's going to be there for well, from now it's 7 years
Yeah.
because it started a while ago. But yeah, so from now it's like a month short of 7 years that it'll be in Gemini. And so, Uranus and Taurus is the ground beneath our feet,
Right.
being shaken up. Uranus and Gemini is going to be this, is going to get shaken up. And our nervous system, right? How we adapt and how so in the beginning, people's fight flight is going to be off,
Yeah.
right? Like that
Yeah.
whole feeling is going to get jostled, and that discomfort around our electrical body. People
Yeah.
are going to have to we are it's been
And
described as upgrading in some way, like it's a new frequency
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
coming. And I'd be curious to know if that idea of the new frequency is something that just kind of keeps getting reintroduced every time
I am curious.
Uranus comes back into Gemini, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious too. Yeah. Yeah. Really cool. Really cool stuff. Yeah. I was going to say, I think a lot about the cranial sacral idea of the long respiration or the long tide, which is the vagus nerve and cranial sacral senses the nerves in your head and your feet through the spine. And there's no trauma in that. And when I think about that, I think we need places to meditate. If you're somebody who gets energy out by running or whatever, do that. I've been saying busy hands, if you can
Yeah.
doing stuff with your hands, that's really helpful. But yeah, lots of
Well, and
energy.
I feel like the pull to be online and be
Right.
digital is actually going to be stronger, and
Interesting.
yet it's not the thing you need to be doing if you're overstimulated. So that, I mean, in a Uranian way, it's like that opposite energy, right? It's like
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
going to be compelled to do the thing you shouldn't be doing right now to make yourself feel better physically,
It
right?
is wild to think that liberation is so closely tied to structure. like you wouldn't think so,
Yeah.
and limitation or whatever. Like it brings up your issues around that. It's interesting. This
Yeah.
has been great, by the way. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. I mean, I could talk about Uranus forever. I think the planet is, it's such a huge part of my birth story that it's,
Yeah, absolutely.
gotta hug it.
I
But
know, right?
yeah,
I'm a big fan.
excellent. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you,
Go on.
everybody.